First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of NFP, the fifth largest insurance broker in the world, combining local expertise with access to global capabilities and solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Savor the moment. Crimson Tide and the Buckeyes for the championship of this most challenging, surreal season.
Kickoff for the crown jewel of college football, the national championship game. That game was played under the bright lights and the warm breeze blowing through Hard Rock Stadium in South Florida. College football's next top teams will battle it out here in Indianapolis in January, in what is typically one of the coldest months of the year. But that doesn't worry Morgan County native Susan Baughman, the woman in charge of Indy's College Football Playoff national championship game.
Just as with the Super Bowl, we have to plan for harsh conditions because it is January in the Midwest. However, we're watching the weather very closely. The last couple of years, it's been very moderate here. So we'll plan for the comfort and the safety of the fans and also the least impact on the team so that they have a great, safe environment. But we're not advocating staying inside. It's football season. We want to put our football gear in and hit the streets.
Susan has experience bringing a major football event to the streets of Indianapolis. She was a key player on the local organizing team that successfully pulled off Super Bowl 46. So how did this woman who grew up on a farm in Mooresville, loved roaming free and playing outside, singing at the top of her lungs, wind up planning and pulling off some of the biggest sporting events to ever come to Indiana? Find out when we sit down with Indy College Football Playoff Inc. President Susan Baughman on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Susan Baughman grew up far away from the bright lights of the city. She spent her early years in the country, in the rolling hills of Morgan County. Dad Joe was a farmer in Mooresville. She describes Mom Sharon as awesome, someone who helped her do everything from read to cook. Susan graduated from Mooresville High School, played on the tennis team, and worked on the yearbook. She went on to Indiana University, where she graduated with a degree in journalism and sociology. Her first big break out of college, a call to work the 1991 World Gymnastics Championship in Indianapolis. And it was a game changer for her. She went on to serve as senior vice president at the Indiana Sports Corporation and was instrumental in organizing and planning Super Bowl 46. Susan now in charge of the 2022 College Football Playoff Championship game to be played in Indianapolis in January. And I'm pleased to be joined by this problem solver, multitasker, and relationship builder, Susan Baughman. Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Thanks for having me today, Gary.
Absolutely. Okay. I've got to ask you, how many days out now? I know you've got a countdown clock. It's probably etched in your mind and probably ticking away now. How far out are we?
84 days. And we are counting.
I'll bet. And you know, the interesting thing is, to me and maybe others, this is what, a 4-year process? So from the time that Indianapolis was awarded the championship game, it's basically 4 years.
Yeah, we were awarded the event in the fall of 2017. And while there wasn't as much to do that first year, we began our planning and went full force. You're right, for 4 years, and we're about to see it come to fruition.
How big is it that Indy landed this game? I mean, I think everyone understands this is a big event. Expected 100,000 visitors, $150 million in economic impact. But in terms of what this game has become, and from a production standpoint and visibility and all those things, put in perspective how big this national championship game is.
Well, I think Indianapolis and Indiana is always used to hosting great national and international events. I think it's always exciting and adds a layer of anticipation when it's an event we haven't had before. And so this opportunity for this first CFP National Championship weekend, I think is going to be very impactful, and for a couple of reasons. One, as you note, it is watched worldwide. I mean, there's so many eyes on this event. That's really going to bring a lot of prominence to the city and to the state, which I think makes us all really proud. But I also think that during the last couple of years that have been really tough with COVID and businesses struggling, This comes at a time where the city's building itself back up. We see the hotels and the restaurants and the bars and entertainment venues really coming back into full swing. And I think this infusion of people from out of town and from around the state and the region can only serve to help pick up everyone's spirits, help boost these businesses, and really serve as a capstone here as we see ourselves coming back.
You mentioned the pandemic. That has had to have had put an added layer of complexity maybe in the planning process. What has that added to the preparations and all the planning that you have had underway for some time now?
Yeah, for certain, it adds a lot of logistics and just a lot of strategizing because, as we all know, no one can really predict what comes next. However, I feel like we've been very lucky coming after last year. We saw March Madness happen for a whole month here in Indianapolis. We saw other teams and leagues come back to be able to play, like the Indiana Pacers and the Indianapolis Colts. So we've had the benefit of learning from all those experiences who have come before us in the other sports. So I think we have a good plan. So if we needed to react and dial things back a little bit, we'd be able to adjust to COVID. It seems like the numbers are going in the right direction. So we're patiently and carefully standing by if we need to institute additional testing, create more distance, and do some of the things that we've seen in the past. We'll be ready to do that. But we're hoping we'll be able to have a full-on 100% attendance event.
Yeah. Indianapolis has such a well-deserved reputation for hosting big events, the biggest events out there. But you mentioned the Final Four this year, and the fact that Indianapolis and Indiana pulled that off, hosting the entirety of March Madness. Well-earned reputation, but that seemed to even go over the top for Indianapolis. What do you hear people in your industry, in the sports management, the business, organized sports, what do they say about Indianapolis, especially after this year's March Madness?
I think it's awesome. Like from the sports industry side of things, I think they kind of hate us, right? Because
I was wondering about that. Is there a bit of
there has to be jealousy, right? A little bit of jealousy, or just the fact that these opportunities do come our way. So I think there's a great deal of respect in all seriousness. But it seems like one of those things where time and again, because of the preparation, the experience, and the willingness for everybody to pull together and do what needs to be done to make things work, Indiana and Indianapolis comes out on top. And so it's got to be annoying to our competitors, but you know what? That's just what we have to do. We got to be us.
Yeah. Give us an idea. Super Bowl 46 was such an iconic event for our city. But as you look at this event, College Football National Playoff, the championship game, it kind of encapsulate what the vibe is going to be like downtown. And again, as you said, downtown has been such a challenge for the last 2 years because of COVID. But when you fast forward to January, what's that week going to be like? What are people going to see?
Yeah, I think that the downtown is going to be flooded with guests, and it's going to be a real football frenzy. I think one of the greatest things about our city for these events is it's kind of like a complete takeover. And so it's going to be football everywhere from what we're doing from a hosting standpoint. We're going to decorate to the hilt. We're going to have free fan activities on Monument Circle, free concerts. We're going to have a free fan fest. There's also a free media day that people can come to, all going on around and outside of the game. So we're going to have people coming in from out of town. We're going to see that rivalry, those jerseys all over town. So I think it's going to be a football frenzy. And honestly, I don't think anybody's going to want to miss that. So we expect our locals to come down and support this event as well.
Okay. Thinking back, and Indianapolis always seems to add that special touch. For Super Bowl 46, it was the zip line in the Super Bowl Village, which is now a part of the Super Bowl. Can we expect a big surprise for the College Football National Championship game?
I think you're going to see something very impressive. I can't give it away because then it wouldn't be a surprise. But I do think that you're going to see, I'm going to say it this way, you're going to see downtown in a different light than you've ever seen it before. And I think it's going to be really intriguing and very innovative, and people are going to want to see this with their own eyes. Okay, we'll stay tuned for that. You mentioned the competition out there, and there certainly is competition for events like this and even lesser events. In the Indiana Sports Corporation, where you've been for a number of years, and you're basically on assignment from the Sports Corporation, right, for this position? Actually, when I took this position, I took a new job. So
okay.
Yeah, so I'm working full-time for the College Football Playoff. It's been an awesome an educational experience. I've learned so much. I love Indiana Sports Corp and everything they're able to do with their events. And what I always thought was so great about Sports Corp is the variety of events and the ability to stay on top as a sports corporation for all of these years. So this particular event, it's a host committee. It's set up much like the Super Bowl. So we're a private nonprofit. And so that's the business that I'm running now.
Well, let's talk about the Indiana Sports Corporation, because it was essentially the first sports commission in the country when it founded in 1979. Now there probably are hundreds of these types of organizations, large and small. How competitive is it for events, not just really big events like Final Fours and those types of things, but all kinds of sporting events now? You have so many more competitors.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Like even within the state, there are other sports entities and cities who bid on and successfully host, like Fort Wayne and Evansville are great examples. Columbus, we have a great sports industry across our state. But what's great is there are so many sporting events that are different sizes and shapes that they can find great fits in all kinds of cities. From a competitor's perspective for Indianapolis, I would say we're really competing against dome cities as far as events that are going to come in a football stadium type setting. So, Atlanta, New Orleans, Detroit to some extent, Phoenix, now LA. There's a lot of competition out there. Dallas, in Texas, you've got Dallas, you've got Houston and San Antonio, all capable of hosting these large scale events. So I think really the key is to stay ahead of the competitors. And the way that we've always been able to do that in Indianapolis is that ability of people to volunteer and lift these events up to a level they've never been. I always say that the most creative ideas, they don't come from the staff. They come from the community and the leadership that we find. And the other thing that I think really separates Indianapolis is just the will of the city government, the state government, and all the organizations to work together so that we do the best thing for everybody and not just one organization. And it doesn't always work that way in other cities.
Yeah. What is it about the volunteer effort here? I assume some cities may have a challenge finding or getting volunteers. Here, some events are oversubscribed, I think, when it comes to volunteers. What is it? Is that the special sauce in your view that makes Indiana so special?
I think that's the magic of our community. It's very giving, and it's not just to sporting events from what I see. It's arts, it's culture, it's for healthcare and different causes. People are willing to give to others and do for others here in a way that you just don't see. And I think there's also maybe a humble selflessness about people who are willing to do things by donating their time and their ideas. And they're not worried about credit. They're worried about getting it done in a way that's impressive. And I think that makes Indiana very, very different.
Well, in terms of people giving their time and effort, you also look at the leadership. And there are so many people, start naming them, you leave people out, but Sandy Knapp and Ted Boehm and Jim Morris and Jack Swarbrick, Allison Melanchthon, the list goes on and on. Talk about that and the importance of having leadership like that and how some of those people probably have been mentors of yours.
Absolutely. I feel like when I had my first job, I really hit the best job I could possibly have because there were so many community leaders already involved with it. So when I came in, some of the first people I met were those you named. It was Jack Swarbrick. It was Sandy Knapp, Rick Fuson, Allison Melanchthon, Connie Israel. They were all working. They were all so experienced, but they were ingrained in the community. And I feel like why I like these jobs and why I've always enjoyed working with host committees is because from what they've taught me, it's always about the greater whole and the sum of its parts. It's never about the part itself, right? So doing things at the very highest level, like Rick Fuson and Jack and Sandy, their standards are so high and they taught us like you can do anything. And I remember Jack always saying, don't let money get in the way of a good idea, that we'll figure out how to do it, which, still is stressful. But he's right. If you have a great idea, there is a way in this community to get it done. And someone like Rick Fuson, who's done so many things from leading events to, being such a stable and continuing force at the Pacers and building the Gamebridge Fieldhouse and making all those things successful all these years. He had the highest standards of anyone. And he can walk down the hallway and he sees the one light bulb that's out and he's on it. Nothing's going to be undone with Rick, and so that attention to detail and lifting things to the higher power. And then like someone like Jim Morris just teaching you everything's about community. So those are the reasons why I love working in sports. It's usually more about the community and very little about the sport itself. And that's been a great combination for me.
Yeah, great combination indeed for Indianapolis and for Indiana. When we return, Susan Baughman is a Hoosier through and through, grew up on a farm in Morgan County, then went on to IU. We'll talk about the early years and how she landed in the sports management business, a turning point in her career. That's when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of National Financial Partners, the fifth largest insurance broker and consultant in the world. Develop your total reward strategies all in one place with the combination of First Person's local expertise and NFP's global resources and integrated solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Susan Baughman, the woman in charge of Indy's College Football Playoff National Championship game coming up in early January. Another huge event, feather in the cap for the Indianapolis sports effort. And Susan, you are truly a Hoosier. You grew up in central Indiana in Morgan County, went to Mooresville. Is Mooresville the Marauders?
The Pioneers.
Oh, God.
We are the mighty Pioneers.
That's right. I pride myself on nicknames. I can't believe I missed that one.
But, that's okay.
Well, tell me about the early years. What was it like growing up? Because you grew up on a farm, right?
Yeah, I did grow up on a farm outside of Mooresville towards State Road 37. Had a great childhood. I think when you grow up on a farm, you probably don't realize what you're missing in town, because I also love like the urban, the town life. But growing out on the farm, we just had a lot of space. There was a lot going on because farming's hard work. So my dad always said I was a lot of fun, but I wasn't that much help. We were all at home all the time and hung out with our family a lot. My grandparents lived across the road. We had adjoining farms, and my uncle was always around. A lot of people who have volunteered with the Sports Corp and some of the events that we do have met my Uncle Bill. So we were a very tight-knit family. I had friends that lived on neighboring farms just around the corner. So we just spent a lot of time hanging out at home. I think as I got into high school, I wanted to be in town and be with every one of my friends a bit more. And so I began to play tennis and get involved with things at school. So it was a good balance.
So growing up on the farm, because my wife grew up on a farm as well, you had to make your own entertainment, right? You had to think about things to do.
Yeah, you kind of did have to make your own fun. I mean, we played a lot of games. I'm pretty mean at card games. I'm a pretty good ping pong player. So anybody want to throw down a challenge with me, I'm happy to take that on.
That's good.
But we played all kinds of games. I remember, we made up stories and ran around in the farm and just had a great time. We also had animals. So that was really fun. We raised rabbits. My dad really liked rabbits, and we had a couple of horses. So we had just all the things out on the farm. Loved my cats and dogs, but it was great.
Outstanding. Okay, so you went to IU. I assume you did not have a vision of getting into the sports business. What did you study at IU, and what did you have a thought going into IU at what you wanted to be one day?
It's really interesting because I had no idea these sports careers existed, to be honest. And when I was in college, sports marketing and sports management wasn't really a degree. It was still PE and rec, that kind of thing. So I was actually thinking that of either going to law school or I wanted to get into writing, journalism, publishing. I thought maybe publish a magazine someday. So I did. I took journalism. I took a lot of sociology classes. I really loved life at IU, and I loved being in school. So when it was done, I actually did apply and I got accepted to law school. But in the meanwhile, I had applied for all kinds of editing jobs and I just didn't find the right fit. And whilst I was looking for those, I actually was told about a job for the 91 World Gymnastics Championship. which I didn't really know what it meant. And I didn't know what the job really was, but I went and interviewed for it and I fell in love with it.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that experience, because I remember I was at Channel 6 at the time, actually, and covering that event. And it was such a big event. Indianapolis had hosted, obviously, the National Sports Festival and the Pan Am Games. And this seemed to be that next really big position on the world stage. Tell me about the World Gymnastics Championship and your role and how that really sparked your career.
My job was support for event operations, and then I was also working in media services. I met a lot of great people like Allison Millington, who was working at USA Gymnastics, and a couple other people. And they basically taught me what the job was. And it was a lot of logistics and problem solving and figuring out how to do athlete services and that kind of thing. I absolutely loved it. And I liked the problem solving piece of it a lot. And I also really liked in that particular event, the international nature of it, which was kind of new to me. And so I ended up really falling in love with working with the other countries to bring their delegations here. And over time, I actually got to work on many international events. So I really love the Olympics. I like the national governing bodies. I also worked at USA Gymnastics for a time, but that was really educational. And later on, I got to work on the World Swimming Championship, the World Basketball Championship, Solheim Cup. So that international culture and flair and that exchange between countries, I think is really important. And I love how sports bridges the gap between countries.
Yeah. An event that is seen certainly globally, but is truly American is the Final Four, the men's and women's Final Fours, which have been hosted numerous times here in Indianapolis, especially on the men's side. Talk about your experience with the Final Four and how you have seen that event grow into the mega event that it is today.
The men's Final Four and the women's Final Four has actually been very important to me throughout my career. And working with the NCAA has been very rewarding. I feel like when I started, I believe my first Final Four was in 1991 or 1990. And we had the opportunity to work. We were really setting up the operations for the event and showing off the city. And when I think about it back then, that was the beginning. We were the first city that got to host the concert along with the men's Final Four as it began to expand and offer more things for the people coming to the event. So that was the Mellencamp concert on Monument Circle. So that was really cool. And to think Indianapolis was the first city to be able to add that component. We also were the first basketball dribble for the kids. So there's been a lot of firsts in this partnership with the NCAA. And I think that's made it really neat to see it grow and evolve into the huge event that it is today.
You mentioned the kids, and it's something I meant to mention earlier when we talk about the College Football National Championship game. And there's a philanthropic, if you will, or a community element benefiting teachers and education. And that's a theme that I think a lot of people don't understand about the events that are hosted by Indianapolis is so many times, most if not all, there's a community component and a real benefit to the community beyond the sports.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part because everybody sort of loves the entertainment of a sporting event, but in capturing people's attention through that sporting event, we can do a lot of good here in the community. And that I think we can really leverage what that event is for the good of a lot of people. And it has so much less to do with the actual sporting competition. The Super Bowl was a great example of that. Indiana Sports Corp runs events all the time with clinics and youth opportunities. For us, with College Football Playoff here in January, for 2 years, we've been working on legacy programming that either benefits teachers by the way of rewards and recognition or provides professional development opportunities with them. One of our big investments was a free learning lab that is available to all teachers and at-home educators across the state. And we reached the number of 10,000 people joining in to use those. It helps teach from home. And that program has grown so successfully that the Indiana Department of Education has taken it on. And it's going to take on a life long after January when we have our game. So I think that's really important. And I also think that the very charitable donors and the corporate community here in Indianapolis want to see that kind of investment. And so they're willing to help us support the operations of the event to be able to sustain this community philanthropy. And that's so important. We're so appreciative of that.
Okay, the Super Bowl 46. I think years prior to that, people would have maybe scoffed. People would have maybe scoffed at Indianapolis ever hosting a Super Bowl, but not only did the city host it, but pulled it off in amazing fashion. Talk about that effort. I'm sure it was exciting, but was it a daunting task? I mean, what was that like?
Well, I was very proud to work on the staff of the Super Bowl. And I think, like, looking back on it, it was a lot of pressure because it was that next stepping stone, that next growth point for the city and the state to put ourselves back out there and have to prove ourselves again. We have been doing big events for a long time, but then that was like a mega event. And there was all these eyes on us saying, hey, can they do it? Can they do it in the winter? Is this going to work? And so I think we felt very passionate and very driven to make it successful. But the platform to do that was, again, reaching outside of the sport of football to say, how can we provide opportunities for the most people to get involved, whether they love football or they are not interested in football. And so Allison Melanchthon and Mark Miles, our chairman, really put us in a position to expand what that event was, even to the NFL, and create opportunities for people to be involved, from breast cancer research to knitting scarves to creating the village down on Georgia Street so people could come and enjoy their own version of the Super Bowl, whether they ever went to the game or not. And so they were very successful in doing that. And it was awesome because it did work.
Hosting events and doing what you do involves so many things, including, I'm sure many challenging kinds of situations. As you think back, whether it's the Super Bowl, and I'm sure there were many opportunities for things to happen during that week, or any other event, give us an idea of some of the challenging moments and that you have to deal with as an organizer, as a planner of these events.
Well, I think a lot of it really comes down to troubleshooting in advance. And the longer you go and the more experience you have, you know that you have to have time for things to fall apart so you can put them back together. I think that's the time frame we're in right now for college football. So you have to create a timeline that gives you time to fix problems. I think that the beauty of doing events in Indiana is there's almost always someone to pick up that phone and call who will help us fix a problem. So sometimes it's infrastructure, it's logistics, it's traffic, it's public safety help that we need. And the beauty of this place that we live in and the way that people think is that you can pick up the phone. There's no blaming. It's just problem solving. So I think no matter what the issues have been, it's that ability to bring people together to group problem solve.
Yeah. Looking ahead, what does Indianapolis need to do to remain on top of its game when it comes to competing for these big events? As you mentioned earlier, the cities and the major venues that Indianapolis is competing against is quite amazing. Very, very competitive situation. In your view, what things do Indianapolis need to do to stay ahead?
A couple of things come to my mind immediately. One, continuing to get the donor support that we need to fund these events, because it's harder and harder to raise money for them based on tangible sales, because most of those rights are retained by the owners. So this corporate giving, corporate support is so important. I think keeping our venues up to date, which we have the best venues and the most walkable downtown of any place. So staying on top of that. I think this is like a call out to everyone. Like, we need to support our local businesses. We need to support shops and restaurants and hotels and all those kind of things, because those are viable activities for people to do when they come in town. So that's what we can do every day leading up to big events. And then I think another really important key in my mind is we have had such a long history of volunteerism back to the Pan Am Games. And a lot of those people are so wonderful and they're still volunteering. But we need to make sure the next generation feels welcome and that they want to volunteer, and that we inspire that community feeling within them and that pride, so that we continue to have a very strong volunteer force as we move forward.
What's next in your view for Indianapolis? Can Indianapolis host another Super Bowl? Do you think that's in the cards? What is that next big thing from a sports standpoint, from your perspective, Susan?
Well, from an assessment standpoint, I think, of course, Indianapolis could host another Super Bowl. There's a process that you have to go through for that. I guess my question is is that collectively everyone's goal, or what is that next best thing? Do we want to try another new event that we haven't done before, or create an event that maybe doesn't exist? Because where else could you do that better than Indianapolis? So I think it captures the imagination of people to come up with, together, what do we want to do next?
Okay, how about what's next for Susan Baughman? Once you put the college football national championship game to bed, what is your on your horizon?
Well, that's a great question. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it right at the moment just because we're busy, but I will be looking for a job. So it's exciting to think of what that might be. I would love to stay, in the community and do something that is good for Indianapolis and Central Indiana, that keeps putting us on the map. So I think what I love and get energized about with my job is sort of the organizational overlap and being able to reach out and collaborate with a lot of different kinds of people. So I feel like my mind is really open to what's next, but I don't know. Good question.
Okay, we will stay tuned on that, Susan. You've been such an amazing part of the community and given so much, continue to give so much back to Indianapolis, not only from a sports standpoint, but otherwise really makes Indianapolis a great place to live. And appreciate you taking the time. We're going to be following things all the way up to the to kickoff in January.
Thank you, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Susan Baughman, the woman in charge of Indy's 2022 College Football National Championship game. And thank you for joining us on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. It's a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can check out all of our episodes and get the latest in Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.